This is Southall in West London, though it could just as well be a small town in India or Pakistan. In April 2005, police officers were called to a home on Abbots Road, just off Southall Broadway, where they found the body of Samira Nazir, a 25-year-old Pakistani girl stabbed to death. Her family owns a shop nearby. It has not been long since their daughter died, yet the shop has remained open. A 16-year-old boy, said to be her cousin, was charged with the murder. The case is still sub judice. Meanwhile, the close-knit community is rife with speculation.
अभी रिसेंटली हमारे साउथ हॉल में कत्ल हुआ है, पर कई कहते हैं कि मतलब वो अपनी पसंद की शादी करना चाहती थी. मुझे नहीं पता, गॉड नोस व्हाट इज ट्रूथ. वो कहते हैं पसंद की शादी करना चाहती थी and parents wasn't agree and she was killed.
The rumours are that a younger cousin killed her. Rumours are family was involved. I don't know. I mean, from what I know is that the parents loved her very much.
This girl was murdered in the house by, I've heard that either the brothers done it or cousin brothers done it in front of parents or in front of mother and sister-in-law.
मेरे पास एक लड़का है, वो स्कूल में उसी स्कूल में जाता था, जिसके साथ वो बच्चा ना जो पकड़ा हुआ है, वो उसका क्लास फेलो था, और स्कूल में यही रूमर चल रहा है कि उसने मारा. He's 16 years old boy.
It came as a shock to me because I knew the girl, I knew the father, I know the boy quite well. In fact, their shop is about 100 yards from here, and I've had dealing with each one of them, including the girl who was killed because I think I dealt with their property matter. In fact, I am their actually family solicitor normally, and I think on this occasion they've decided to stay out of Southall.
The mother was there in front of mother's brother kills.
वैसे अगर मेरा बच्चा ऐसा करे तो मैं खुद उसको मार दूँ.
Nowadays, if a young Asian woman is murdered, her parents and family become the prime suspects. The unfortunate result of the growing number of incidents of honour crimes across Europe.
I know people, at the moment it's quite common for parents to carry out honour killings, as they say.
About 6:35 p.m. on the 12th of October 2002, officers were called to Charles Hocking House, which is this building here behind me, to a man that had jumped, they thought, from the 6th floor to the concrete, critically injured, not expected to survive. Officers went to the scene there and they found Mr. Abdalionis. They took keys from his pocket, went to the front door at number 24, gained entry and went to the bathroom inside of that property, and that's where they found Heshu. She'd been stabbed some 17 times, she'd had her throat cut, she'd been stabbed in the back, in the neck, in the head. It was a horrific sight. Mr. Yonis was taken to the Royal London Hospital, Whitechapel. He wasn't expected to survive his injuries that he'd suffered in the fall. Some 6 months later he was released from hospital and subsequently charged with Heshu's murder. We interviewed friends and we interviewed family, and we also interviewed Heshu's friends, and we built up a picture which told us that over a period of time, some 12 months or so before Heshu had been killed, there had been very significant problems between Heshu and her father. Heshu had been beaten over a long period of time, that she'd run away on more than one occasion, and in fact we think that on the day she was killed she knew that she was in very, very serious trouble and that she'd been locked inside of the property unable to leave. We know that she'd called friends seeking help, that she had tried to arrange for some money to be put aside and some clothing to be laid down for her because she was planning to run away that day, and in fact we found the runaway letter inside of the property. I have to say that there's strong evidence that Heshu's brother Heman attempted to mislead us, as did Heshu's mother, and the evidence suggests to me that they attempted to mislead us in order to cover up Mr. Yonis's culpability in Heshu's murder.
It is hard to accept that women living in a liberal Western country like Britain can still be subject to medieval feudal laws and can still be murdered by their own families. Why would parents do such a thing?
Nobody would listen to us, nobody would understand what is honor killing, and nobody even would believe that it may happen. I heard from a policeman, he says that how can I believe that a father turn up to kill his own daughter because she's in love with somebody? But the reality is really dark.
Heshu's father felt great shame, in his view, in his words, at the fact that his daughter was going out with a Christian.
We think that he believed that Heshu was bringing dishonour upon the family, shame upon the family.
Too much of it is about respect and reputation.
In our language they call it Izzat.
Izzat, honor. Across South Asia and most of the Middle East, this is a deadly word where women are concerned. The medieval feudal concept of women being seen as a valuable capital of a family has endured to this day. Families do not take the giving away of this capital lightly. The marriage of a daughter or a sister is thus a matter of honor, to be avenged if the unwritten codes are broken.
My brother tried to kill me. I have been forced to marriage, but my husband didn't love me. I asked for divorce. By asking for divorce, that means I brought shame to my family, and they threatened me to kill me. Always they are speaking about me, calling me names. Usually they are telling that I am a bad girl. When I asked for divorce, it wasn't my fault. They forced me to go for a marriage that I didn't want really. And my cousin, he didn't want as well.
What I've heard, they were arranging the marriage for her, which she was not happy with it.
Your children were born and you loved them unconditionally. That love shouldn't change when they're 18, 16, 17, it shouldn't change.
Is then forced marriage to blame for the poisoning of family values?
We've been talking to community representatives, community leaders, community groups for some months now about what it is that causes these crimes. Some of the leaders have made it very clear to me that the main causes, the main drivers for these type of crimes are marriage and divorce. Marriage, those people who either don't want to get married, those who are forced into marriage, those who want to get out of marriage. Murder is just the tip of the iceberg. We're talking about dozens of other cases of assaults, false imprisonments, sexual offences, all sorts of things that happen within the community. In this country alone, in Wales, there are probably 12 murders every year that are honour-based. The Metropolitan Police and the Crown Prosecution Service have got together to look at probably 119 cases now, going back just over 10 years, where people have either disappeared or in suspicious circumstances they've been killed. We've most recently came across it in relation to a case called Dosanjh, which is a Sikh gentleman from South Asia. In that scenario, because he was upset that his daughter had run off with a white male, Jewish male, and he couldn't find his daughter, he went to the extent of organising a hitman to find the father of that boyfriend in order to kill the father of that boyfriend, so that his daughter and that boyfriend would then go to the funeral, so he could then kill the daughter and the boyfriend at the funeral. Because of the use of an undercover police officer who pretended to be the hitman, we were able to stop that crime from occurring.
How far have you got with those 119 cases?
We would probably say at the moment that we've got through maybe a dozen to 15 of these cases. Some of them we've been able to identify people who are suspects. We are either investigating them or we're in a position to very nearly charge them. But many of them are simply a case where we've been able to identify that they weren't honour killings.
Wembley, another of London's many Asian areas. The community here is mostly Gujarati. We were invited invited to a local charity event. Inside, you could feel the energy and ambition of London's South Asian community.
Welcome. I'd like to welcome you to the Wild Charity Show today. We've got a fantastic lineup. We've got live dances, there's a fashion show.
Looking at the young people on stage from the local communities, it's hard to believe that anyone could force hip, westernized people like them into a marriage they did not want. It's hard to believe there are girls just like these who have been forced into marriage by their families. We visited a refuge outside London for women who escaped from forced marriages. The girls we spoke to were smart, attractive and independent. If you passed them on the high street, you would never guess the terrible ordeal they have endured. We have to conceal their identity since it may put their lives in danger, again from their own family. Just like the young people in London, these girls too were brought up to expect an arranged marriage and had their reservations about it.
Last year, July, I didn't want to sit there with my friends and say, arranged marriage, no. I'd never do it. I'm not stupid. I wouldn't do it. And then, even when you say no, you think it's okay, but then you get the comments, the pressure, and you think, okay, this is what it's like.
They got my sister married off and he only came from the red passport and things like that. They made it, for 2 years, they made it absolutely clear and absolutely certain to us that this wasn't going to happen. Why should it happen? It's happened once. We're not going to let this happen again. And you know when someone reassures you, people like your parents, you actually do trust them.
Family went for a bad patch at one point and they was like, oh, we don't want another forced marriage, we want our daughters to be happy and we want everything to be okay, I'm sick of this happening to my family.
And when it came to the moment of truth, it turned out the girls did not, after all, have a choice.
I finished my course and then I went to Bangladesh, so they planned it. So you know, the summer holidays in school finishes June, July, around that time, so they planned it around that time.
And when I came back into the country, I actually found out they had actually a plan for this. They said we actually deserve what we got.
Her family took her to Bangladesh allegedly to attend a cousin's wedding.
I'm just packing a few things.
Why? You going on holiday?
I hope not.
How old were you when your parents planned this trip to Bangladesh?
I was 17 years old.
We next went to the Foreign and Commonwealth Office in London to meet the Forced Marriage Unit. Fawzia Samad has helped countless young people escape from forced marriages.
What we are finding is that a lot of young people are now being taken away at a younger age, and they're taken away in the middle of their school year, so in the middle of their GCSE exams or their A-levels or their first year university. They're being taken overseas and forced into marriage, and quite often just, you know, for really long extended holidays. So they're missing exams, they're missing college, they're missing university.
The fact that I'm not ready to get married, I'm not old enough to get married, I don't have my own house, I haven't finished off my career, I haven't done so much of my life to get married. And how am I meant to, if I'm still in college, meant to support myself and some other guy? Because he ain't going to look after me, he's just going to batter me, try raping me and basically get his red passport and then get lost.
Most young people feel that they want to give their families a chance, because quite often their families don't say to them that you're going to be taken overseas to be married.
Within a few days of being in her relative's house in Bangladesh, things began to take a rather predictable turn.
My mum's relatives were coming in and out of the house, my father's relatives were coming out of the house, and they said, oh, why don't you make your parents happy and get married? And then from about 2 weeks later or a week later, we had men lining up at the door from 9 o'clock, 8 o'clock in the morning to 10 o'clock at night.
She had reason to believe that money changed hands, that the man she was forced to marry had paid bounty hunters to find him a British Asian wife.
Ribas is people that you pay for to find British brides, and they paid somebody 5,000, which they haven't actually paid them yet. They said look for British brides or American brides or anybody that's abroad that will make us money. They found out there were some British girls in the country. They made an appointment or made some agreement with my father.
How did they decide on this one particular guy?
Well, oh my god, he is so ugly, it's not even funny. You can ask.
say that.
I have to say that. You're so young.
You can, this is true.
Okay, really what it was, he was from our good class, so we tried to run away, but it was at night and there was thousands and thousands of men, and we was being approached by so many people, and people were trying to drag us over here and drag us over there. I had my gold to sell to somebody, say, you know what, if you help me you can have my gold for free.
They took my passport away from me, and the money, he kept all the money side of it. Where they placed me, Bagmoina, it's like living in the jungle, so you need a boat to go out, and then you need to travel another 2 hours prior to get into the city, and then you need to get located into the embassy and things like that. So there was no way in hell that they was going to let me do that. I mean, how am I meant to go out into their town first and catch a boat, me as a woman?
In every Asian culture, a huge industry has grown up around every aspect of the wedding ceremony, be it Muslim or Hindu or Sikh. Great importance is given to apparently tiny details. In such an environment, symbolic gestures of defiance can be powerful.
Her Mendi day, I wore black when everybody wore white because they was all dressed up, and I refused to come. And her Mendi, I actually decorated it with her boyfriend's name, and it was gorgeous. At the end of the day, I might as well make it her day. I wore actually white to symbolise death. Everybody was, why are you wearing white for? I did say to my family, I wouldn't say hobble. Hobble means I do, Islamically. I actually said double instead of hobble. So Islamically, I've never said I do, and I've never given my consent.
In the end, nothing worked, and they were forced to go to their new husbands' homes.
Because of course, if they do get taken abroad, and if they are forced into a marriage, in some cases the young person may be raped because they may be forced to consummate the marriage, and in some cases even they may be repeatedly raped until they're pregnant, and they may not return to the UK until they're 6 months pregnant, by which time obviously anything else, any alternative action is not an option.
You read a namaz to bless your marriage so you can have sexual intercourse. I was thinking, what on earth is going on? And then he started touching me, and that's when I felt physically sick, and I started crying and everything, and I cried so loud that my mum and my sister came and said, what's wrong? And I said, look, this is what he's doing. And they said, get back in there. And I will repeat my own mother's words. You dirty slag, I want him to touch you.
He used to say to me, let me practice on you for my new wife. Just basically I used to fight him off me. Nobody would help me at night.
After my parents left, he raped me. And his words were, I only want to see you bleed.
And my 2 older sisters actually knew what happened to me, that he tried to force himself, because they were just saying, oh, we went through the same thing, we didn't want to sleep with our husband, you'll get used to it in the end.
He automatically wanted to consummate the marriage straight away, and I said no because I didn't know him too well and I wasn't ready for it. And I'd says, well, when I know you better then I will, and I'd rather get to know him first. He was having it a bit, so he'd force himself on me, push me against the wall, so I'd stay downstairs or I'd read a book, and he'd take the bulb out, he'd throw my suitcases down the stairs, left me locked out for 45 minutes in the cold, punched me.
And one day he beated me up, and he stripped me naked and said, God, I really can't do this, it's disgusting.
You don't have to,
No, but I want to. I need to. I need to. He stripped me naked and said, he just stripped me naked and said, you know what, I can't remember what he said, it's so disgusting. He stripped me naked and said, did you want any other guy to touch you? And I was screaming and shouting and no one came to help.
My partner gave me Heather Harvey's number over in Bangladesh. I actually left a message for Heather Harvey, but nobody actually got back to me, and I waited months and months, and I used to cry, and I was like, somebody's going to come pick me up, and somebody's going to knock on the door and say, oh, this such and such living there.
What happened was I didn't have no help from the Commonwealth Office, anything like that. I couldn't go to them. There was no access for me to go and do that.
Are there any instances where you could not rescue someone?
There have been times where we have not been able to help a young person. There could be various reasons, not having the location of where a young person is.
You have to be careful about who you speak to and when you speak to them, and how have you safeguarded the young person before you do that, so that you don't actually alert the family, for instance. And never underestimate the risk, because in very, very severe cases, as we've seen with cases like Hishionis that you mentioned, the young person could actually be murdered by her family. So there is potentially very extreme risk. Very often, exit is the only answer. Very often, the only way that young person can be safe and can get away from a situation of pressure and abuse is to leave the situation.
It was just, how I came back was just convincing them, you know, this marriage was perfect, this marriage ain't on rocks, this marriage is absolutely perfect. It's God, it's, you know, this and that. Every aspect that I thought of it was just based on lies. The marriage shouldn't be based on lies, it's the most beautiful thing that Allah could give us.
My face had sunken in, my rib cages had actually gone in, and I had no strength to even move around. And I was eating probably 1 egg a day, because they refused to buy me food, you see. What happened was somebody took pity on me and then took me home. But I mean, a lot of people do say this girl, she's going to literally die in your hands if you don't let her go.
Soon after coming to power, the Labour government scrapped the primary purpose rule for entry clearance, leaving most girls vulnerable to being forced to bring their husbands into the UK.
People have come to me and said, can you please help us? Can we write to the embassy, say please don't give the visa? If a letter was written, then the families would find out where it originates from, and then the families will find out, so they don't really resolve that problem.
They said, well, how are you going to help the Muslim Pakistani community? And I said, well, I've got to set my shop out now, I'm telling you that I'm going to have a different attitude.
Anne Cryer is the MP for Keighley in Yorkshire, which has a large Asian population. Asian families were coming to her for help with visas. Suspecting that some girls were being forced to bring their husbands over, she insisted on speaking to them alone. This did not go down well.
I'm asking for someone to be allowed to enter, to get them entry clearance, and I'm supporting that application for entry clearance. It's got to come from the sponsor, i.e. the wife. I said, I'm not having discussions with young wives with other members of their family presence when I'm not sure that pressure isn't being brought to bear. So I said, this is how I'm going to carry on. Well, this Labour councillor, he went absolutely ballistic with me. He said, you're talking absolute nonsense. He said, you have no idea of our culture, you have no idea of the norms and the traditions that we have. He said, it's completely unacceptable that you should have said to that man he should leave the room while you should talk to his daughter.
And I wrote to the Foreign Office to help me and things like that, but they let him in because they didn't match my details and he did his details up, so that's why he's in the country, but he's still underneath my name. So I wrote to the Home Office and I haven't had no reply back to them. I got my MP on my side and they told the Home Office said that he's a third member of party, he can't do anything about it. So basically he's underneath my name in this country and he's living with his brother, and I absolutely can't do anything about it except for name and shame him. His name is...
You really want that?
Yeah.
Are you serious? Because they will know it's you.
But if I can't name and shame him, what am I supposed to do?
Do you think there's a threat to your physical safety if you were to run into this way?
I think so. I know so, in fact, because the only thing that I can do is phone the police, and they'll probably take quite a long while to get there. What if I don't even have time to get my mobile phone out? What if nobody's there? What if he follows me? What if he does this? What if he does that? Why should he be here?
When I came back into the country, Heather Harvey is great. I think she's excellent because, when as soon as she hears your voice or as soon as you say your name, she'll remember your story.
Can you tell us how the first marriage unit came to be formed? Two factors probably. There was a very well-known case of a young woman called Ruxana Naz, who was murdered by her mother and brother because she ran away from a forced marriage, and tried to start an independent life. And that happened in Leicester. But we were also increasingly seeing cases coming to our British High Commissions and embassies overseas of young people running away and turning to us for help to come back to the UK because they were being forced into a marriage. So I think all of that together, plus a great deal of non-governmental organisation pressure to deal with the issue.
The government did what governments do best, set up a working group, to examine the whole issue of forced marriage. We spoke to the man who was co-chairman of the working group on forced marriage, Lord Nazir Ahmed.
I was approached by Mike O'Brien, a minister in the Home Office at that time. Myself, Baroness Uddin, and a number of other colleagues, parliamentarians, were invited, and he said that there was a lot of concern around forced marriage and also intimidation, and would myself, along with Baroness Uddin, look at this problem and also report back to the government. And we went round to the whole of United Kingdom actually, and we had various seminars. We spoke with police, we spoke with social services, we spoke with colleges and teachers, and we almost everyone we could find.
The group produced a report called Choice by Right and came up with recommendations. These included the need for a dedicated unit to deal with the issue, which is how the Forced Marriage Unit came to be established in October 2000.
There also needed to be better joined up government working, so it highlighted the role for education, for health, for police, for social services, for all the public sector to be aware of the issue and to know how to provide appropriate assistance.
Asian communities have been practicing forced marriage in Britain since the early 20th century, but it has taken this long for it to be officially condemned, partly due to a reluctance to meddle in culturally sensitive issues. The same attitude that left a legacy of ethnic immigrant groups being ghettoized in isolated pockets around the country. Matters of intervention and progress left to leaders from within the community.
The report found that there were a very broad range of reasons for why a family might try and force their child into a marriage. And they range from simply feeling that there needs to be closer family ties.
Because they want economic benefits for their family. So the mother says, well, I want my nephew to come over here because my sister's poor. But what she doesn't realize is that the way she's asking her nephew to come over here is by ruining and destroying her daughter's life.
Sometimes it may be that they felt the young person was going wrong in some way, was having problems in the UK culture, and they felt it wasn't good for them.
Also about, just trying to keep particularly women under control and to control their sexuality.
Like the young person was exhibiting homosexual tendencies, or that they had suffered sexual abuse, and in some cases that was a cause of extreme shame and embarrassment, and they felt it was a good way to solve the problem and to cover up the issue.
It isn't even an Asian culture that I have been battling against to a certain extent. It's a rural culture. It's a culture of tiny villages in Mirpur where this has been the tradition, this has been the culture that mum and dad choose the husband or wife, because it works both ways, and the girl has to go along with that.
Lord Nazir Ahmed is Mirpuri himself, yet he too faced opposition.
The biggest challenge for us was to get the community to recognize that there is a problem. First, when we were appointed as co-chairman of the working group, we had a huge response, a sort of like almost a backlash from the certain parts of the community, very small part, but very vocal part of the community, who said, this is our culture, you must stay out of it and do not interfere in the way that we arrange our marriages. And probably some of the problems existed in their own families because they had done something wrong.
If my community came from Karachi or Lahore or Islamabad, I wouldn't have the problems that I have.
Most of the South Asian population of Britain is based in the old textile towns of the West Midlands. Overall, 1.5 million are Muslim, 500,000 are Hindu, and 3.5 million are Sikh. 70% of forced marriage cases come from Pakistan, 20% from Bangladesh, 9% from India, and the remainder from a range of other countries. It is socioeconomic factors like unemployment and education that really determine the number of forced marriages in each community.
It started off by saying, why didn't you bring this problem to the community? And I said, because you're not interested. I've asked if I can bring it to the community before, and no one believes it. Everyone says, we don't have forced marriages, you're inventing it. And so I said I had to go public on it. I know from then on I had a very bad press with male Asian, Pakistani Muslim councillors, Labour ones, on Bradford. Culture, you know, it's all about that.
They can practice their culture, is no problem, but not killing of women. And women's life is coming after many things, like culture, like nationalism, religion, and all those things coming first.
And they don't go into women's rights or anything like that, you know. That doesn't come into it.
One day, very quiet, and I built a plane. Subhanallah, Allah please will give me a part of the Jannah.
People consider obedience to Allah and obedience to husband as the same thing.
Fear Allah, fear Allah.
They are not following Islam nowadays, people, really. They are, I don't know, they have made their own principles.
We decided to clear up this issue once and for all. We went to the mosque at Finchley, North London, where they let us in thinking we were Muslim. There were objections from the congregation about the proximity of women during their prayers. We were very fortunate that the senior imam of the mosque is such an enlightened man.
Appear on the camera, they can let them know. Alhamdulillah al-Azim, my dear respected brothers, we are Muslim. We are believers, mu'mineen. Special people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Special class, chosen people.
The irony is this whole thing is done in the name of Islam while it is a cultural and ignorant practices. So the whole saga of forced marriages is the remnant of the Jahiliyyah, you know, the pre-Islamic era. I did several live programs on this issue and we were really abused and, you know, sweared at by, you know, the public.
You felt that some of the imams who have recently been brought to were not enlightened enough.
See, in this country, lot of mosques are basically tribal mosques. There are people who have come from a certain village. They have established a mosque wherever they live. And when they have established this mosque, they also get an imam from their own village. I mean, he is as educated, as intelligent, sophisticated as they are.
Do people call you up with problems like forced marriages?
They do. People have come to know if you have a very difficult problem and nobody can solve it, then you go to Muslim Parliament. I know there was somebody who was a Rajput and he said to me that, look, my parents are insisting that I must marry a Rajput girl. And he says, well, I know my tribe here. There is no girl of my age. I mean, does that mean that I'm hoping and have to hope and pray that a girl is born and then I wait for 18, 19 years to get married? Obviously, I'm not going to do it. I cannot imagine that when we have, especially in the Muslim community, when we have 1.6 million people, Muslims living in this country, young men cannot find a suitable partner here. There was somebody, a blacksmith or somebody, water carrier, the saqqaj as we call it in Urdu language. I mean, as far as I was concerned, both were lowest of the lowest caste. But for them, one was superior, better than the other. And they wouldn't let their children to marry.
Generally, when we get young men calling us, in a sense it's easier to repatriate them to the UK because mostly young men are able to travel around freely, whereas women are not. So even if he is in some remote village, he will not have any problems, you know, getting on public transport and coming to the High Commission. Where we've had issues around young men have been when they've been gay, and we've had calls where they have not really come out to their families about their sexuality. You know, even if families suspect that they may be gay, they have then taken them overseas and forced them into a marriage.
The Imam counsels men who come to him for advice and help on forced marriages, among them gay men who may or may not have come out to their families.
The other day I had a person who was gay. He said, I was forced to get married. And even he married and he had 3 children also. Although he was gay, his family knew he was gay. And sometimes, you know, they have a hidden relationship, they cannot tell. So there is double victimization here, that They maintain a relationship and then go along with the forced relationship also. And then they abandon the forced relationship. They go along with the family values, and they just bring misery really to the next family also.
And when they come back, it's about not wanting to bring the wife over, because obviously, once the wife comes, then they're expected to lead a normal married lifestyle.
Samina Pervez is an outreach worker with the Reducing Domestic Violence Initiative, a Birmingham-based charity for whose benefit the event at Wembley was organised.
Even when it's the boy who has been forced into marriage, it's the women who suffer.
Ultimately, if you really do think about it, if the boy's been forced into marriage, that will affect their relationship, it will affect everything. He may not, he probably doesn't want to be with her, she'll be mistreated as a result of that, and may even be sort of physically and emotionally abused as a result. I know I've had a number of cases as an outreach worker whereby women have disclosed to me that, my husband was forced into marriage, he didn't want to marry me, and he used that as a reason to beat me and to mistreat me basically.
The fallout from years of abuse, both physical and emotional, leads to psychological scars for these women. In the London borough of East Ham, Asian women are coming together to heal these scars. They hold weekly women's group meetings under the guidance of local councillor Shama Ahmed.
Yeah, the MB actually, this is a medal from the Queen, and I get it because of my community services. This organization particularly I set up because of that reason, that women, particularly Asian women, they are suffering 99% from depression. I set up this group just to bring these women in this center, and we are trying to bridge the gap between older generation and younger generation. Ye hai Fatima, that's Farhat, she is from Pakistan, and Mrs. Zina Rafiq. She also come here, her husband passed away. This is Surya Hamid, she is also a widow.
As soon as the subject of forced marriages was introduced, the discussion took a lively turn, and the difference of opinions between generations became evident.
I think a lot of mothers have changed their views because their children have actually got married into families and they've not worked out, and especially being abroad and the kids being brought up here.
कई शादियां वहाँ की भी कामयाब हो जाती हैं और कई नहीं होती, लेकिन मेरे ख्याल में जो बच्चे वहाँ का माहौल ज़्यादा पसंद करते हैं, ज़्यादा उनका आना जाना होता है, तो अगर उनकी शादियां वहाँ की जाए तो वो शायद ज़्यादा कामयाब हो।
यहाँ के बच्चे फिर मानते नहीं हैं पाकिस्तान में शादी के लिए।
यहाँ पे ज़्यादा प्रॉब्लम होता है ना ये शादी का, कि वहाँ पाकिस्तान में ये होता है कि जो पेरेंट्स कहते हैं, तकरीबन जो है ना माँ बाप, उन लोगों ने इतना उन लोगों उसको इस तरह किया हुआ होता है बच्चों को अपने, कि वो अपने माँ बाप की ना कहना मानते हैं। यहाँ पे तो ये होता है कि वो कहते हैं कि नहीं हमने यहाँ करनी है तो करनी है।
No, you brought up them in such a way. While we brought up our children differently in this country.
It's not because where you're saying that yes, the way our children have been brought up in Pakistan or India, that they listen. I listen to my mum. My mum, she got all of her children, mashallah, she's got she's got 6 children. Out of the 6, 4 of her children she got back home, married off to back home. Me, I ended up, I'm going through a divorce. My older sister, she was happily married. Her husband was brilliant. It's not that we don't listen. We've listened to our parents, but my mum now feels that her children have listened to her and done what she said, but she's ruined our lives. 12 years of my marriage I've given, can you believe? 12 years, and my husband, he just doesn't want to come here. And now I've realised, no, this man does not, love me and my son, and he's just selfish in the sense that, if I sent him money, I took things for him back home, that was fine, you were nice then, but because I'm living here, he now wants me to go back to Pakistan. But I'm not ruining my child's education.
उनकी ख्वाहिश यही होती है कि हमारी बीवियां जो है ना हमें इसी तरह करके ट्रे में ला के खाने दें, और जबकि वो और उनके साथ कोशिश ये भी होगी कि हाँ जॉब भी करें, जॉब भी वही करें, वो ये घर में बैठे और इनको फिर भी ट्रेन के आगे रखी जाए।
लंदन में चले जाएं, लंदन में दरख्तों से पैट से उतारते हैं, खा लेंगे, वही ना, ये नहीं पता कि यहाँ आके क्या परेशानियाँ होती हैं।
सही बात है।
At this point, we were reminded just how cruel a practice forced marriage can be. Councillor Shama was discussing a case with one of her group members.
अज़रा आप बता रही थी वो कोई लड़की 2 वीक पहले यहाँ पे आई थी, उसका क्या हुआ?
उसके ना चचा के बेटे के साथ शादी हुई थी.
अच्छा.
यहाँ से इंग्लैंड से गया वो लड़का. तो बस वो पहली वो जो अदावत होती है उनकी अपनी रिश्तेदारियों की वजह से कोई अदावत थी, उन्होंने बदला लेने की वजह से रिश्ता मांगा.
अदावत की वजह से?
हाँ, दुश्मनी की वजह से पहले रिश्ता मांगा. उन्होंने कहा ख़त्म हो गया, चलो हम इन बातों को छोड़ के हम इसका रिश्ता देते हैं, हो सकता है हम ठीक हो जाए. मगर उन्होंने 1 वीक लड़कियों को रखा है, लड़ाइयाँ शुरू कर दी, जेवर ले लिया. लड़का कहता मैं तुम्हें रखूँगा नहीं. इस तरह 15-20 दिन गुजर गए, वो प्रेग्नेंट हो गई है लड़की. तो फिर उसको कहता मुझे बच्चा ही नहीं चाहिए, कहता मैं तुम्हें रखूँगा नहीं, मैं तो बस तलाक देनी है क्योंकि मैंने चाहता यही था. उसने कहा कि तुम चलो मेरे डॉक्टर के साथ, मैं बात करता हूँ डॉक्टर को कि हमें अभी बच्चा नहीं चाहिए. उसका अबॉर्शन करवा दिया उसने. पूरे 1 महीना 10 दिन हुए उसकी शादी को. वो इतना लड़की रोती है, पूरे 1.5 महीने बाद वो लंदन में यहाँ पहुँची है. तो उसकी कहानी सुन के मुझे इतना दुख है, इतना रोए हैं कि ये काफी छोटी सी उम्र है.
So again, whether it is the girl or the boy who is forcibly married, it is the girls who suffer. The men abandon them as soon as they get indefinite leave to remain stamped on their passports.
गरीब घराने की थी, इसने शादी कर ली. अब इसके उस आदमी से 4 बच्चे. सैटरडे संडे काम कर लो, बस इतनी सी बात हुई. इतनी बात के ऊपर वो नाराज हो गया. अब आज उसको 4था वीक हो गया, वो घर से भागा हुआ है. अब मकान की मॉर्गेज सर पे आ गई है. वो औरत एक पागलों की तरह से कभी एक को फोन करती, कभी दूसरे को फोन करती. मैं किसको पूछूं?
On the other hand, brides brought over from the subcontinent are often abused and thrown out of their homes by their British Asian husbands.
तो लड़कियों को छोड़ दिया कि भैया अब आप जाएं, हमने आपको नहीं रखना. तो ये है कि उनके लिए काफ़ी मुश्किल होता है यहाँ पे कि वो बेचारी कहाँ जाएं.
Why do their families tolerate this?
कि आप किसी की भी कोई किसी किस्म की गारंटी तो दे नहीं सकती हैं. अब जो पेरेंट्स हैं वो कहते हैं जी हम क्या कर सकते हैं, अगर लड़का ही हमारा नहीं राजी हो रहा तो हम तो कुछ नहीं कर सकते.
Why do so many women stay on when their marriage breaks down and they suffer domestic violence and abuse?
हम पाकिस्तान से हैं, तो वहाँ से जब लड़की एक दफ़ा शादी करा के आ जाती है तो वो एक किस्म का समझ ले वो उसकी आखिरी शादी होती है. वो उसी का घर, उसने खामन के पास ही रहना, चाहे कुछ हो जाए, चाहे मर जाए, चाहे कुछ हो जाए. वो कहते हैं कि वापस नहीं आनी चाहिए, ये हमारा एक कल्चर है. तो वो फिर वहाँ पे माँ बाप के लिए, रिश्तेदारों के ताने, दोस्तों के ताने, उससे बचने के लिए वो फिर लड़कियाँ बेचारी यहाँ दर बदर भटकती हैं कि हम अब क्या करें.
Despite the terrible repercussions of a forced marriage, the practice continues. Its victims grow younger and younger. Government and social service agencies are fighting back with raising awareness amongst school children and teachers.
Some years ago, one of the schools, they were doing some kind of literacy after school class, and a number of girls actually wrote to the teacher who's taking the class saying, you know, we're all scared that when we reach the age of 13, 14, because we've seen our friends, sometimes our sisters have been forced into marriages. When we approach that age, we're also anxious. It's the largest Bangladeshi community in the country is settled into hamlets. We're mostly involved when there are issues around parenting. In most cases, a mother was forced into a marriage, and because of that, she may be suffering from depression, which then has an impact on the level of parenting that she can provide.
Do as we say, Asma. Don't shame the family, Asma. Be a good girl, Asma. But it's not fair. I don't want to get married. I don't want to marry him. I don't want to marry anyone.
Often around puberty, around the ages of sort of 13, 14, a young girl in particular may start exhibiting problems such as her attendance and her participation and motivation drops off.
That's why I'm going. Leaving all of them.
You're going to run away?
In some cases, the girls exhibit other behavioural problems. They may become very isolated and very withdrawn. Sometimes they may be self-cutting or otherwise self-harming. Sometimes they may even be anorexic, and it may be a whole range of factors like that that come to the attention of teachers.
I'm not going to hurt you, right?
That's what they say. They're not going to hurt me, but they will. They are. They all are.
I'm looking for a courageous victim who can persecute their parents. Once this persecution happens, then it will be deterrent for the rest of the society.
parents do know that if they force, then they could be in difficulty with the law.
I think we need to be very careful because we really need to know. I mean, I think we already have enough laws.
The issue of whether or not forcing somebody into a marriage should be made a criminal offence is one that various groups and government have been talking about on and off for several years. I mean, 4 or 5 years, it comes around time and again, people discuss, should we do this, shouldn't we do it?
If you're forcing someone into anything against their will, it's against the law anyway.
For instance, if you're forcing somebody into marriage, a lot of the cases we deal with, that involves a range of offences anyway. It may involve domestic violence, it may involve emotional abuse, physical abuse, it may involve unlawful imprisonment, it may involve restrictions on freedoms of movement and freedoms of association.
Unless somebody can convince me and say, well, so-and-so has forced someone into marriage but has got away with it.
Which is why at the moment it's only a consultation process. We're seeking to put it out to consultation and get a wide range of views from all the stakeholders to try to decide whether or not this is something we should do.
However, once caught, are the perpetrators brought to justice?
The judge that sentenced Mr. Yonis said that he would take into account the cultural difficulties, the cultural circumstances in this case.
And they reduced the life sentence to 14 years.
I believe that 14 years for murdering a girl in her own home, the place she should be safest, murder committed by the man that should always have protected her, 14 years is a light sentence.
As far as whether he, the father, received a light sentence, the reality is he received a life sentence. So he was, in this country, obviously you don't go to prison for the whole of your life.
That means that 14 years, maybe many other people would accept 14 years, but they wouldn't tolerate the woman to bring shame to the family.
Mr. Yonis should always have been Heshu's protector, and in fact he was her killer.
The judge in that particular case obviously heard about the victim and what happened to her. But at the same time, when he was sentencing, he was simply looking at the man that was standing in front of him, heard about all the mitigating factors, everything that was playing on his mind at the time that he carried out the murder. And the judge then sentences in that regard, with that information.
And we had another case that the woman has been threatened by her family to be killed, and exactly the father told his daughter that I would go and spend 14 years in the prison, but I don't want let you to bring shame to the family.
You really just simply cannot deal with the defendant, the person who's charged, in isolation. You have to look at all the circumstances before you make a decision on sentence.
If woman has no right and has no support with inside their country, they should have support in the European country from European government. Sazan, she is working volunteer with Iranian and Kurdish women's rights organization. She's a Kurdish from Iraq. A few years ago, before she came to the UK, she was working with the independent women's organization in Iraqi Kurdistan in Suleimania. It was during the time that KDP and PUK were in power, and Jalal Talabani was one of the leaders of the Kurdish part. They closed the refuge that she was working, and they took all the women with themselves. Some of them, we know that has been killed by the family because they just send them back.
And this is the man who is now the president of Iraq?
Yes, Jalal Talabani, yes, he's the president of Iraq now. When the killing is bad for everybody. If it's good, so let's practice it everywhere.
Arranged marriage is believed to be a system that works and has worked for many centuries. For people like Navid, an Air Force pilot who was disabled after an accident and for whom it became difficult to find a partner.
People, they have certain tastes, parents for their children. Someone with a disability they wouldn't even consider.
Actually, he was engaged with his cousin and it was his choice, but they refused. And I was a bit upset.
Really think about how, whether it would be arranged marriage or love marriage. But when the situation did arise, as far as her sister and my friend, they introduced us, so I knew what their family was like. So I was happy to consider an arranged marriage, even though I was born here, brought up here. She's got 3 younger sisters who are married with arranged marriages, and they're all doing fine.
Yeah, and I'm also fine. I'm happy. Yeah.
Did you expect that he would have an arranged marriage, or did you think maybe he would find?
नहीं, मैंने बेटे कभी भी नहीं सोचा. मैंने बच्चों की चॉइस पे छोड़ दिया हुआ था, क्योंकि बड़े ने भी लव मैरिज की थी. मैंने कहा he has right as well. जो मर्जी पसंद करे. Even मैंने बेटे, I'm not prejudiced. Even I don't care about religion, because जो किसी के घर में पैदा हुआ है. You have to be nice person. This is what I believe.
So I mean, this thing is in our tradition. You can say this is in blood.
I think the important thing is that we have to be very, very clear that we are distinguishing between forced marriage and an arranged marriage.
And there's a difference between an arranged and a forced marriage.
Arranged marriage is, being arranged by parents or the guardian.
To be honest, I don't really know what arranged marriage when your parents find somebody for you. I haven't really, from what I know, I haven't really heard about forced marriages.
Forced marriage is a marriage given to somebody with their consent.
Where we have an issue is where one or both parties either don't consent at all, or the consent is extracted under duress or under pressure, which includes emotional pressure, and that's a forced marriage.
Well, if they are forced to get married, again the same question arises, whether girl, she accepts the decision of the parents and she thinks that they have made the right decision. This is again by giving them a respect to the parents.
It is very clear, the one who is elder, we have to respect him. Whatsoever, we cannot raise our voice to him.
I don't mind arranged marriages. I prefer a love marriage.
Whoa, I've been pressurized to marry back home, yeah.
Personally, from personal experience, if I get to a stage that I can't find a girlfriend, then I'll just say my mum and dad just go find me a girlfriend.
For us guys, it's either getting married back home, because they're saying the girls who are born and raised here, they're not the right person.
I wouldn't shut no idea out. I wouldn't shut nothing out. I wouldn't say no, I don't want to do it, I'm not against it. But obviously that's tradition. Yeah, it's been going out back for years now, and I'm not going to follow that tradition.
Well, I believe personally, I don't mind actually if I get arranged marriage or if I find the right person.
I think your parents are likely to arrange a marriage for you.
No, they've given me an option.
They've given you an option?
Yeah, they've given me an option. I've got a month to find one for myself, otherwise they find it for me, yeah.
Just 1 month? That's not a good time.
Yeah, but I've got a gun.
In this day and age nowadays, arranged marriages don't really work out anymore, because people want to be with the person before they get married.
The parents in the Somali community, they introduce families.
They expect you to actually go out and find your own wife. If not, then you resort to your parents as a means of finding a wife.
It's not really an issue. It's nothing about arranged marriage or forced marriages. If I meet someone. It's not good.
I personally wouldn't go up to a girl and say, look, do you want to get married to me? Well, that's a bit silly. But I'll tell my parents that, look, this is a girl that I found. If you want, go speak to their parents and see what type of people they are like. And then so that whatever time that we spend together, it will be in our marriage and according to Islam, which is the lawful way.
Well, I think parents should let their daughters and sons get married to whoever they want, because at the end of the day it's their choice, and because they'll be living with them. I've had a love marriage myself, so that's why I don't believe in arranged marriages.
Yeah, I had a love marriage myself. Obviously at the beginning they weren't, but they got used to it.
There's a very thin line between parents wanting good for you and are you being forced into doing something without your consent.
I told my parents I didn't want to get married. I think I told my mum 3-4 times, didn't want to get married. She's having none of it.
I myself has had a love marriage, but my parents have always said, arrange or love. They're very liberal.
What you ultimately need to decide upon is whether you trust your parents enough to make that decision for you.
So did you feel pressurized by your parents?
Oh yeah, definitely.
In what ways?
In the fact that I knew I'd lose him if I didn't. It just would have been a case of, well, move out of our house, do what you want to do, just don't come to us.
You think the parents are being really awful and really horrible and it's the worst thing that could ever happen to you. They are always considering it in your interest.
Yeah, they thought they were doing it for my good, but it all got to reputation and respect. And that was it. The good of their daughter goes out the window.
Perhaps the problem lies in being open to the idea of arranged marriage in the first place, thus creating a potential for that trust to be abused.
It's, I think, trying to differentiate what forces and what arranged marriages are, and that's where the problem arises. And rights of parents against rights of children, and their right, then the children's right to make their own decisions.
At the end, we return to the scene of the murder in Southall, knowing only one thing for certain: the human rights of a woman must come before respect for outdated traditional beliefs, and this includes the right to choose a partner and the right to live.
झूठ बोले कौन विछड़े यार मलामदा